proud host of this series. As its name implies, Innovation at the Edge highlights trailblazers from across the innovation landscape and provides a forum for them to share their work, discuss their ideas that stretch the boundaries of the possible. Tonight's program is curated by our colleagues at the MAVERiC studio and will explore the story of gold and money as innovation. Yes, money makes the world go round, but money itself is an innovation. Let's dig into it. I'll let Joe take it from there.
Thank you very much. And also, stop by the patent office if you are looking for anything. Office of Innovation also services our patent and commercialization industry here on campus and throughout the community. So please come up and check out. We are more than just a show here. So, here, guys. So, hello, my name is Joe Unger. Welcome to Innovation at the Edge. Tonight, our very special guests come to you courtesy of MAVERiC Studio. That is where I am the showrunner. MAVERiC Studio is the mixed, augmented, virtual, extended reality innovation center. Normally, this room would be filled with about half of the people from there, but they're up doing their final tonight, so they'll be following along on the live stream. We also have another guest coming to us from Oregon tonight. They'll be joining us in the second half by Zoom, but also the live stream. So everybody out on the live stream, there's cameras back there. My name myself is Joe Unger. I am the showrunner and do things like this. I also run what we call the night markets here at MAVERiC Studio. Those are where we have the opportunities to take our students working in XR and our alumni and have them pitch and present, but actually run in our live arcade in a night market style right here for you, where you can come and try out the latest in XR developments, visualization, games, entertainment, but also advanced medical visualization and journeying into space. So we do it all up there in MAVERiC. Come up, check us out on a Tuesday or Thursday sometime. If you're a student, we are accepting applicants for the next time. We only take 25 per term. It is an industry training program. I am here as a member of a public-private partnership with the Office of Innovation. Thank you very much for hosting us tonight. And we'll get on to this show, which is what you came here for. It's much more interesting. So my guests here tonight are on the slide and have names. So Dr. Edward Watts is right here at UC San Diego, one of our local on-campus experts who I got to have a nice conversation with this summer when we launched our first ever night market with our own coinage. So he helped me and helped us launch those coins, which are right in the back of the room there. I'd like to see them outside. And we discovered that there's a lot more to this conversation than just money here on campus, but it stretched back through time, through 2,000 years of time, which you can see his new book that just landed right here. And also Jon Cavuoto, who I just met through our partners over at Valara, who is involved here in the bullion industry, who is really on the cutting edge of the modern gold economy. And since gold is everywhere in the news today, from covering buildings to spiking in costs to maybe being money again, who knows? That's what we're here to discuss tonight. So Ed, can you start us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you think about gold these days.
All right, so I'm Ed Watts. I'm an ancient historian at UC San Diego. I work on Roman history, but in the course of doing my work on Roman history, I became very, very interested in Roman coins, and particularly the way the Roman financial and monetary system works. And I think what is very interesting to me, and what I think has become really clear to me over the last few years, is the Roman financial system is something that we actually would look at and recognize significant portions of. It's an economy, especially in the empire and the later Roman Empire. So like, let's say, the 3rd century BC through basically, I don't know, the 7th century AD. This is an economy where most of the money is actually in financial instruments. And so in that economy, when you are coining precious metals, what you're doing is, in essence, creating a type of value that is connected to, but is also in some ways sort of intrinsically valuable, separate from those financial instruments that have value. And so I think what's particularly interesting about this moment that we're in right now is there are moments in Roman history where you see the money supply based in financial instruments becomes really, really stressed. People lose faith that it actually is going to retain its value. People lose faith, for example, that like loans on which all your bonds are based are actually going to be collectible. And people then become really interested in transforming that money, that is virtual money, into something that is tangible. And what the Romans do really, really well, and what I think this is interesting in our context also, what the Romans do really well is they basically store precious metal in case there is one of those moments. So you see these moments in, say, like the 80s BC. There's a massacre of a bunch of Roman merchants. They're the loans that back all of the bonds that people have sold on their commercial activities suddenly are worthless. And the Roman government mints tremendous amounts of silver because they have been hoarding that money for emergencies. And so I think what they understand is something that I think we're beginning to understand as well. You know, the financial instruments that are, you know, the vast majority of the holdings of the wealth in this country are potentially susceptible to panics. They are supported more or less by faith, and governments need to have an ability to provide something that actually has value. And what the Romans are able to do, both in the late Republic and in the Empire, is produce these instruments with precious metals that hold value in these moments where people are starting to lose confidence in their assets. So I think this is kind of where the Roman story of gold becomes something that, you know, in this moment we can look at and say, we kind of get that, right? We kind of understand how people can lose faith in what we think is money and turn to something that has inherent value, like a precious metal.
So John, you built your entire, the last decade at least of your life off of that very idea, right? Where the United States left gold behind and went full fiat and the world went crypto. You saw the opportunity that there was something here that wasn't being seized on.
Yeah, so, all right. So, yeah, I started First National Bullion 19 years ago and have grown it into a company that's done over $2 billion in precious metals transactions, where we're delivering physical metal. But my journey in metals started well before that. I was in the commodity business as a licensed commodity trading advisor, and I would buy coffee, sugar, wheat, cocoa, gold, silver, crude oil, for investors, futures contracts and options on those markets. And somebody had mentioned a book to me about the Federal Reserve Bank and said something about gold and our money. And I traded gold, but just the first time I bought gold, the U.S. coal got bombed, and everybody thought gold and oil was going to spike. So we bought gold options, and that didn't work out great. But in any case, so I knew about gold, but didn't really know the history of money. So this book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, it's written by G. Edward Griffin, who now is actually a customer of ours, which is kind of neat. It's come full circle. And we minted a coin for him, his Libertatum coin. We're the exclusive dealer for that. You can visit us at any one of our 5 convenient locations or online at firstnationalbullion.com. So in any case, I read this book about the Federal Reserve Bank, and it really was about the history of money and banking. And the history of money is gold. I mean, there's been wampum, there's been seashells, people could use tobacco, but nothing has ever worked as well as gold. You could lose it to a shipwreck in the bottom of the ocean, and 1,000 years later, it will not rot, decay. It'll look exactly, basically, like it did when that ship sunk. So they've tried other things. It really always kind of comes back to gold and silver. This is about innovation, and I would recommend anybody read that book, because it took me down the rabbit hole of Austrian school economics and liberty, and Ron Paul was one of the people. I think that Willie Nelson also had an endorsement of that book on the back, and Ron Paul, and I was like, how is this congressman, because this is probably in like 2000, 2001 I read this book, and I said, how's this congressman saying this? And then I found out about him, but he's always been a gold bug and a proponent of going back to the gold standard. In any case, that book really gets into the history of money, and then the Federal Reserve Bank, which was it's basically a private banking cartel, and most people don't understand how our banking system works, and I believe it was Henry Ford that said if they did understand our banking system, there'd be a revolution before tomorrow. And it really is the most blatant scam in history, the Federal Reserve. It's not federal and there's no reserve. As a result of the Bretton Woods agreement, we became the world reserve currency, just like Rome. It really became, everyone was using Roman gold and silver coins in trade throughout the world. It wasn't just the Romans. Well, the US dollar became the world reserve currency because as a result of Bretton Woods, we said that our dollar would be backed by gold. 1933, it became illegal for people to own gold. And most people don't know this. I didn't know this. I mean, I was trading contracts on gold, but I didn't realize it was illegal to own gold in this country from 1933 until 1974. The most free country in the world, gold been money for thousands of years, you couldn't own it. I mean, you could own it as jewelry, but you had to have a special license to buy it, as a dentist or a jeweler. You couldn't buy gold coins or bars. It's crazy. According to the US Constitution, only gold and silver should be money, but yet they made it illegal. So it's crazy, to me. I know this is about innovation, sorry, I'll get there. So I educated myself on this. I started buying customers gold and silver, or buying options on gold when I found this out, because I thought gold would be $1,000 an ounce if people knew this. And they all lost money. Gold just stayed at 300 for a while. Took about 6 years till gold doubled to 600, and then I started this business. And now I've seen innovation in this business. Things have gone online. I started with brick and mortar stores. I wish I would have, started e-commerce. I think just with fraud, it was so difficult. And but now you can buy on our website. But for 5 convenient locations. So where I've seen innovation, and Adam Trexler, who's going to be on a little bit later, has a neat product that makes gold more usable. Because one of the problems with gold is it's so valuable. How do you use it if you just need some eggs or a cup of coffee? So he's come out with an innovative product, and it's something that we sell at our stores. It's called, the primary customer of his, he owns the technology, but his primary, I think his largest customer is probably gold backs, and they created a gold currency that it's actually gold, and he'll explain it more, so I won't get that into it. He manufactured them. That's one way where it's become innovative. But the other thing, and where I think it's going, is I think that we're going back to a gold-backed currency in some form, but I think it's going to be a central bank digital currency. And whether it's the BRICS nations, they're starting to buy gold like crazy. That's really the central banks have been buying up gold, and it's what's driven the price. Retail investors haven't really caught on yet. But I think where we're going to go is a gold-backed central bank digital currency where they use blockchain technology, or where people privately, which is something we're working on, tokenize gold. So you don't have to have the coin in your pocket, but you could use blockchain or crypto token to have ownership of gold or silver that's at rings or vault someplace like that. So I think that's kind of the future of where this is going.
Right. That's a good opportunity too, because as the gold standard came and went, and finding out it was illegal to own gold in the country was a revelation for me on this journey, right? But that also comes back to, at one point in time, the golden coin in Rome was innovation. It was the thing that changed money, and it changed day-to-day life. It was this thing showed up that was shiny yellow instead of bronze or silver, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple of innovative moments for Romans. The first is Romans actually resisted coin and gold for a very long time. So in the back you can see some of the Roman coins that I brought. You can watch the evolution of Roman money. And Rome actually embraces physical money quite late. So Greeks are minting coins in the 7th century BC. Rome doesn't start doing it until the 270s BC. And what they start with is bronze. That is basically bronze that is equated to the weight of the bronze. Like its value is entirely intrinsic. And they really don't start coining silver in large quantities until the middle of the 3rd century. And then back there you'll also see the first denarius, which is the backbone of the Roman financial system in really the Republic and into the Empire. But the Republic has plenty of gold. They do not want to coin it. And the reason is because it concentrates, as you said, it concentrates too much wealth in a small package. And in a situation like the Roman Republic, that's dangerous, right? If you have a commander who can concentrate massive amounts of wealth in very small packages, you can actually do quite a bit of damage to a Republican system. And so the first person to actually coin large amounts of gold is Julius Caesar while he's fighting a civil war, because exactly, right? This is exactly what you'd expect. So the real innovation, so that's the first innovation, right? Romans recognize, actually this is dangerous. And having this in circulation as coin and as something that has the state's imprimatur on it is dangerous because it can lead to political upheaval. The second thing is eventually they come around to the idea that, yeah, I mean, this should be part of our monetary system. So after Caesar starts coining it, they continue to coin it. But there's a shift in the way the currency works in the 4th century AD, where they issue a new gold coin on a different standard. And it's part of a monetary reform that's launched around 293 AD. And it's originally supposed to be a trimetallic reform, where you have bronze coins, silver coins, and gold coins all circulating together and easily move, you can easily transform in a predictable way, your silver or bronze into gold. It very quickly falls apart because basically the emperor who created this misjudges the silver linchpin in it. And you end up with a bimetallic system where the gold circulates at basically full purity. It's 23 karat gold, standard weight, 4.4 grams more or less. And this standard is used for 700 years. Because what this represents is stability. The coin is actually, it's officially called the nomisma, but everyone calls it the solidus, because this is what it is, right? It's solid. And so the Roman innovation is to say, what you can do is create a monetary system that holds this massive value in a predictable way. And as long as there's a Roman face on this, you can basically use this as a way to be sure that you're participating in a lot of commercial activities. And so even as the empire starts losing territory in the 5th century AD, solidi continued to be the main source of large-scale and large-value transactions across Europe, the Middle East, but also in India. Because this is, the commercial exchange mechanism that's used for international trade, both within space that was once Roman and then across most of the Indian Ocean. And it becomes something where places that are not part of the Roman Empire anymore or never were part of the Roman Empire have to mint their own solidi in ways that mimic what the Romans have, because the Roman supply is not keeping up with demand. And so, so the second innovation is the Romans recognize that having this particular coin that has this predictable value and this predictable purity that is tied not to financial instruments. And the Roman economy, when the solidus was created, is still a financial instrument economy. It is very, very clear that the amount of money minted as solidi in, say, the age of Justinian is maybe 2% of the Roman economy. It is not a significant portion of the actual money supply. The Romans understand this thing needs to be predictable in its weight and its value and its, and its purity, so that you get all of the advantages that come along with being the person and the state that creates the coin of international monetary exchange. And so I think this is the second Roman innovation. They recognize there's actually a tremendous value to doing that, and they don't mess with the purity because they understand to do that would be to undercut the power that they've created for themselves by inventing this particular type of coin.
It's interesting too that you say that, the base weight and the metal. It seems that the innovation that kept through time that we've even returned to, and which I have up here, is that the issuance of the Cougourmet, right? When it went to 1 troy ounce. Can you speak to how that created the modern gold system that we know of when the nations abandoned their gold standard and we returned to 1 ounce of gold is 1 ounce of gold. That it wasn't Caesar anymore that drove the value. It was the value of the gold itself.
Yeah, so the Cougourmet, once it became legal to own gold again in the U.S.
Yes.
Sorry. The U.S. didn't actually mint coins anymore, or gold coins. We didn't start minting gold coins again until 1986 is when we made the first gold eagle. So South Africa, the Rand refinery came up with the Cougourmet, and it's still the most widely circulated bullion coin in the world. And it's an ounce of gold. It's not pure. It's got a little bit of copper and I think silver, so it's more durable. Gold is very, very soft, so this made it a more durable coin. But in the US, once people were allowed to buy gold again, and gold, I think at the time when we came off the gold standard, they had it pegged at like $35 an ounce. It ran up to $800 an ounce. And people were buying these Krugerrands, and up until 1980, I think was the peak, about $800. And it is easily identifiable, pretty easy to test to verify. They've got some good counterfeits now with tungsten where they coat them, but it's pretty simple to actually figure out. They could get the weight, really, they perfected that, I think, with tungsten, because the atomic weight of tungsten and gold are very similar. And then they coat it with, I'm sure, melted Krugerrands, so the color's perfect. And if you don't have any fancy equipment, which we do, you come in and we could x-ray stuff, and we have other equipment, we test it, you could just drop it or ping it against another coin. Tungsten's going to be very dull. If you drop it on a table, it's just going to thud, whereas a real Krugerrand will have a ring to it as resonance. So that became the most common bullion coin, and people started buying that as an investment. And then you could purchase stuff with it. It wasn't really a currency. But yeah, absolutely, if somebody's willing to sell you their Volkswagen for a Krugerrand, I mean, that kind of stuff does happen. In fact, I've seen it happen with the product that we're going to talk about, the Valorum product and the Goldback. One of our sales guys went to deliver something at a customer's house in Scottsdale, and Scottsdale only saw, I think, a 1978 Blazer or something sitting there, and he asked the guy about it. And he said, "Oh, you want to buy it? My wife would be thrilled to get rid of that thing." And he said, "Yeah, I'll buy it." And he ended up buying it in Goldbacks. The customer said, "Well, how about those Goldbacks?" And he paid him, I think, $18,000 in Goldbacks for it. So that was kind of, so people can use, Krugerrands or gold as a currency. And again, whether that was innovative, the Krugerrand, I mean, gold coins have been around for thousands of years, but for a modern bullion coin, that was the first one. And it's still the most widely circulated. Every day, coins come in, mostly from the 70s, that are the Krugerrands. But they still make them right now. So yeah, it kind of brought back gold, I think, into mainstream.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about that is, I think there's a story with the Krugerrand that you can also see one of the points that I have in the back. When you have this ability to create coins of gold, you can basically play political games with them too. And I think that's what the Krugerrand is so interesting, because this is like apartheid era South Africa. And it's a way of basically seeing an inefficiency in the marketplace and taking advantage of it. And that's why South Africa has massive amounts of gold, and it has the ability to do this, and the international financial system has a need and doesn't have a supplier. And so there's a real benefit to South Africa doing that. What you'll see with one of the coins back there is there's a Roman solidus that is the first coin that has Jesus on the front of it. It's issued in the 690s, and it's issued because the Roman emperor at that time he has just signed a peace treaty with the Arabs, the Muslim Arabs, and he's very interested in breaking the peace treaty. But the Arabs are upholding the peace treaty, right? They're paying, and what they're required to do is pay a massive amount of tribute in solid. So he creates a coin that they cannot touch.
Oh, wow.
And so he puts Jesus on the coin, and Arabs cannot pay tribute in solidi because this coin has Jesus on it. And so there's a really significant reaction where they start minting coins with calligraphy on them. And what the Roman emperor says is that's not a solidus, right? We determine what a solidus is. Solidus has Jesus on it. This has writing on it. They're like, it's 4.4 grams. It's pure gold. It doesn't matter. And he restarts the war. And so, so these things, because gold is so valuable, if you have the ability to sort of create something that the marketplace needs that is, in that medium, you have tremendous political abilities to do things that your state otherwise wouldn't be able to. And I think it's really interesting that you see this, in the 60s, just the same way you saw it in the 690s. This is something that's powerful. When a state sees the opportunity to really become the main sort of definitive supplier of coined gold, that's power. And it's a power that states understand to be something that they can activate.
Yeah, I think you hit it a little earlier on the BRICS community. You see a lot of minting going on there, but also just the innovation of minting, right? And that in the times of scarcity, and this country has gone through many different times of currency scarcity. And even now you could say that the digital currency is trying to fill a gap because we don't have enough medium of exchange that works for everybody. So, gold still has that power and is, again, seeming to claim trust in at least the larger organizations. How common do you see that in your storefront on the consumer level of awareness of that sort of power that gold still has in our market?
Well, the fact that people are coming in, I mean, gold for thousands of years, people have been attracted to it, the Aztecs, the Romans, everybody. So yeah, people are coming in now, I think, because they are concerned about, I don't know if it's exactly your question yet, but they're concerned about the dollar and that our governments abuse the printing press, which is what's happened for thousands of years. And that's really the story of gold. Gold doesn't do anything innovative. It's the same as it has always been. It's really a story of the dollar, and that's why I think that gold's going to continue to go higher, and why customers are going to continue to come into our stores as they see the dollar, the purchasing power of their dollar go down. And you said the coin was solid, and people knew that. So to have something tangible that you can't just produce more of, and it's the reason you knew the value, and the value's constant, is because gold buys the same amount of stuff. So whether it's bushels of wheat, over time, it generally kind of buys the same amount of stuff. In this environment, I think we'll end up buying more stuff just because we're really abusing the printing press more than ever. And we had that privilege because we were backed by gold in the beginning. And so, yeah, it's interesting. I think that we have not remedied any of the issues that have driven gold to, from when I started buying at 300 to now at over 4,000. And when you see cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin at, now at 90-something thousand, but go to over 100, which, by the way, I'd known about Bitcoin for a long time and bought it at 300, but when it got to 1,200, which was at the time was the price of gold, I just thought it was stupid. I was like, how is this cryptography worth the same amount of an actual ounce of gold that they'd moved tons of earth to get? And so, obviously that was a mistake. And since I bought it as a trading vehicle, in at 50 and out at 56, and then I got paid in Bitcoin at 95,000 on some gold, and I was like, I'll hold on to it, whatever. So, where I think is going though, and what I really think that Bitcoin is and that technology, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's going to go towards the tokenization of gold and backing up gold, whether it's the BRICS nations do it or the US dollar becomes gold back again. When Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, he said it was a temporary measure to stop currency speculators. Well, temporary, I guess, if we go back to it, it would make it temporary. And I think that, no one knows who Satoshi is, and I don't know how many people here know much about Bitcoin. It would be my guess that Satoshi is the NSA, and that, well, why not? And this is not my original thought. I was having lunch with a gentleman that's probably now, a billionaire. At the time, he had just started one of what was a startup, innovative, Bitcoin ATM company. And at the time, when we were having lunch, he was concerned to put them in the US because nobody really knew if this was going to be allowed and how Bitcoin was going to be adopted. And that's when Bitcoin was at 300 and I bought it. So he was only putting them on Indian reservations in the US, and then he had them in Macau and in Canada and other places because he was just concerned with legal ramifications, what they might be with banking laws and anti-money laundering stuff in the US. But he was explaining to me that about Satoshi, and no one really knows who it is, but that the NSA had come out with a white paper well before Satoshi, and it basically outlined exactly what Bitcoin is. And he said the level of cryptography is too advanced, most likely, for one person to have come up with it. So most likely it was a government agency, and based on that paper, it was his belief that it was the NSA. And I think that's kind of a Trojan horse to a central bank digital currency. And so you come out, when Bitcoin originally came out, it was kind of outside of the banking system, and the government couldn't control it, and there were private transactions, and it's become less so. And now that the government's kind of embraced it and it's become very mainstream, I think that what happens, and who knows, but is that the government will at some point, like they did with gold, say you have to hand in your gold, it's illegal to own gold. I think you'll have to hand in your Bitcoin for a USD coin, which may very well be backed by gold to get the rest of the world to still accept us as the world reserve currency. It's how we became the world reserve currency in the first place. But I think that they'll probably say, hey, this is being used for terrorism or child porn. And because the government doesn't have control, we need to make this illegal. It's too dangerous, Bitcoin. And most people will comply, and they'll trade in their Bitcoin for whatever it is that the government gets. In the meanwhile, the free market has perfected the technology, and people have gotten used to it. They'll tap their phone to pay for something. And it's actually very convenient. I love it. I go to Sprouts, I tap my phone, I pay for my groceries, I'm out of it. So now they've gotten everybody used to that, and I think that's how we get away from cash and get away from, it'll be crypto, but it'll be central bank crypto. I kind of think that's the way it's going. Sorry, it's a lot of topic.
No, that's straight on, because really when we're talking about gold's a proxy for trust, right? It's something that humans for the last 2,000 years have said, this is trust. And we often hear Bitcoin called digital gold. And a lot of that seems to be because of that ledger. That blockchain provides the trust. That is the metal in the ground, is the ledger and the sheet. But the transferability of a ledger versus a transferability and just an understanding of a coin, right, in your hand. But it all comes down to, can you trust that coin? Like we were mentioning the tungsten, gold-colored tungsten before. So I'm kind of curious, because this kind of leads into, hopefully when Adam comes on here, security. Like the one thing that I really like about Adam's product, which is back there, the foil-based bills. People talk about them, but is that they're very secure pieces. There's lots of security in them. From the ancient time to modern, let you guys go at this. Where did we see Rome dealing with security issues, and how does that lead into your day-to-day on securing if it's actually what it is?
Yeah, I think anybody who collects Roman coins knows about a foray, and the foray is exactly what you talked about, right? A foray is your tungsten Kruger run. And so you have different levels of sophistication for that. When Romans are doing that, generally you're using a bronze, and in some cases you'll have the same basic die. You'll have the same die that you'll use for a bronze or a silver that you'll use for a gold as well. And so what they would do is they could use the same bronze and take a bronze that was minted, add gold to it, and basically match the weight, and then this would be a very good foray. Some of the other ones that you see are, for example, it's quite common in the moment of that reform that leads to the solidus, it's quite common to find clay forgery dies that are used basically to, instead of using a metal die that you're hammering, these are basically, just fill the die. And so it's not as precise. Those are low-level forays. They would not be things that anybody but a grocery seller or somebody would actually fall for. But when Romans are dealing with Sully, they're very, very careful to be able to understand that this is what it says it is. So there's a couple things that you can see quite clearly. First, one of the most common things that you see from Roman marketplaces are solidus weights. So these are 4.4 grams. And so what you would do if you are paying for something with a solidus, it's a very high value coin, so it's not like you're going to be buying groceries with this. But if you're paying for something with a solidus, you will put it on a scale and it will be weighed next to a 4.4 ounce or 4.4 gram weight. And if it matches, it matches, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. You also have tons of high value coins that have basically test marks on them, where you will see that there was a merchant or a banker who will put a test mark on it just to see if this is coated or if this is pure metal. The government also has really strong mechanisms to prevent those things from coming back into circulation. They go out, one of the things that you could do with ancient coins, especially solidus, is you could clip the side of it. And so you could get just a little tiny bit of gold off the side of it, and then, if it's not noticeable, that thing can still circulate, because these coins are all minted by hand. So you do have lands that, that miss, you have misaligned sort of front and backs, that this happens. So it wouldn't be so obvious to someone in the Roman world that a coin has been clipped. But these things all come in as tax payments, and the tax collectors are potentially prone to clipping coins, because they have tons and tons and tons of them coming through, and they could say, that's how I got it. So the Roman government says that, starting in the 360s, every tax collection in gold must be melted into a bar, and the bar then must be certified as the exact weight. And so these coins don't circulate multiple times. They eventually will come back to the government and be reissued as 4.4 grams. And so these are the sorts of controls that the Roman government is putting in place, just to be sure that that you are not having lots of counterfeit coins circulating. But it's interesting because that reform that I talked about that leads to the solidus, the reason that collapses is actually because of a security issue. So, what is set up is a tri-metallic system with gold coins, the solidus, silver coins, a silver-washed bronze coin that is 5% silver, and then bronze coins. And what people realize is 5% silver it's not an alloy, right? It's a wash. And so you can actually sweat the silver off of that coin, and it's not clear if you did something illegal or if it's just worn. And so you get ultimately a system where these coins that have a notional value in silver as a 5% silver coin are circulating as bronze coins, and there isn't a stable value for that coin. And so what the government had a couple choices. One was to basically say, okay, this is a bronze coin, or to double down on that silver content. And the government chooses to double down on the silver content, and they cannot manage the security of that coin. And it ultimately leads to the entire system falling apart and the silver aspect of that system disappearing. And so security is a big issue, and most of the time the Roman government got it right. But there is a moment where pretty catastrophically they get it wrong, and it has big, big consequences for the financial system.
John, I know when I've been in your shop, pulling the coins, there's different, all sorts of different visual technology to electronic testing that is employed in actually verifying that trust. I feel like that's kind of the business you're in.
Yeah, so if you come into our stores, we have XRF X-ray guns, which will test, only so deep, but you'll know the purity of whatever it is, and they'll tell you if it's copper. It'll tell you whatever it is, tests all the elements. But then we have another piece of equipment that will test all the way through. So whatever it is on the X-ray gun, you can make sure that it's that same material, whether, and you set the machine for what it's supposed to be, and it either is or it isn't. So those are the two common things. And then I mentioned earlier, there's a ping test, and then it has to be a certain weight or measure. It is hard to actually get the weights and measures right. Unless it's a really good one, like one of the really good crew grinds, for the most part, the weight or the size is wrong. So that's very easy. Then obviously more high-tech equipment. But you talked about the silver coins and washing those coins. So also going back to the U.S. government, the Constitution, all coins dollars are supposed to be gold and silver. Only gold and silver is supposed to be money. I think it's Article 1, Section 8. So we've obviously gotten far away from that. But our coins used to be 90% silver, and we have a bunch of silver dollars back there that were used in the 1800s, and those are neat. I always think the history of that, like some gunslinger had this coin in his pocket, like what he paid for. And then up until 1964, and I don't know the years that we started with, but for really most of U.S. coinage, the dimes, quarters, and half dollars were 90% silver. And then people started realizing, well, the silver in these coins is worth more than what I'm buying for them, so they were hoarding these coins. So from 65 to 69, they got rid of, they got rid of it in 65, in the dimes and quarters. There was no silver anymore. It was just an alloy coin. And then 65 through 69, the half dollars were only 40% silver. And then after that, there was no silver in our coins anymore. And an easy way to test for those is if you have a handful of coins and you just hold them together, you can see the edges on the modern coins aren't silver at all. The front of them look like they're silver. but they're not. They're just coated, and not even coated with silver. I should know, but I don't know what it is on modern coins that they use. But if you look at the reeded edges, they look very copper, and copper in color. They're not even copper anymore. So yeah, we've completely debased our coinage. There's no gold or silver in any of our U.S. coinage unless you buy gold coins from the U.S. Mint, which are way higher than their face value. Obviously, they're worth the intrinsic value of the spot market price of gold or more. But anyway, yeah. So equipment. Yeah, there's X-ray and XRF technology to test, and then a Sigma metalytics machine is what we use a lot, and that tests all the way through. So yeah, to know that what you're buying is real, you want to buy from a reputable dealer, and you will test everything in front of you.
Well, I'm going to check to see if Adam's on here and see if we can bring in our third. Adam! Where are you all? Here we go. Hey there, Adam. You should be watching through the stream, and this is the first time for us to try this. Hey!
I know that guy.
Hello. Oh, we can't hear you. Hold on. No, I don't know. He seems unmuted. Are you muted? That's my audio. This is his video. That's my video. Audio. Audios. Okay. Okay, momentary technical difficulties. Sorry about that, Adam. The speaker's out. The speakers aren't playing, so bad. My microphone is
Yeah.
How about now?
Yeah, I think I can hear now, but not see you guys at the same time. Let's see. Can you hear me?
On my cell phone.
Oh, that's an idea.
Hey guys. I can at least hear you.
That's right.
Hi.
Yeah, a little bit of it is.
Do you have Adam's cell number?
I do not. Adam, can you put your number in and John will call you?
Or if you have my number, text me.
Oh, wait. Talk again?
Can you hear me now?
Oh. This way. We're gonna jerry rig it with a with the microphone here. There we go. All else fails, some piece of technology will work. Okay.
We should be able to hear you now.
Okay. There's a big delay between the Zoom.
Yeah, you'll want to turn your volume off on the YouTube or whatever, or down. Or mute yourself on Zoom.
Make it different.
Okay. How about now?
Here's a stream audio. Sort of. Oh, you know what? Now there's also this Zoom. Okay. How's that? Nope.
Oh, we should hear.
You can probably at least hear me now.
Here.
Yep,
How about that?
we can just hear him. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. Any chance of getting the Zoom fixed, or are we just going with audio?
Let's just go with audio for now, since we only have 20 minutes with you, I guess. We'll keep rolling. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm really enjoying the talk and eager to see you guys, but we'll go old school, just like coins.
Just like one.
Well, Dr. Trexler is joining us from Valarium. Dr. Trexler, can you talk about yourself a little bit and your company?
Sorry, what about the company?
I haven't given a full rundown on how your process is or what you do, but if you could introduce people to Valarium, that would be great.
Yeah, great. So Valarium was founded in 2012. My background was actually really academic in the history of money, but focused on the collapse of the gold standard and how people talked about that collapse and what might take its place, in the early, 1910s, 1920s. And I learned about this technology to deposit gold atom by atom into a thin film and create effectively a bill that you could print on. And the technology is very difficult. It's used in how we make microchips, some medical devices, advanced coating surfaces for things like fighter jets. But there were two people who were really brilliant, Paul Diffendaff and Laurie Johansson, and they recognized that this could actually deliver an appreciable amount of gold. And it turned out that it was an extraordinarily hard thing to do at cost. But we've been working on the technology now for quite a while, and we're able to make these bills, completely out of gold with a kind of polymer wrapper around them. But the gold is really deposited atom by atom, and we build up a thin film.
So that's the biggest.
And that lets us deliver, $200 to $500 worth of, exact gold. 24 karat gold, the same as a coin. And that form factor is really catching on for all kinds of reasons we could discuss. But, we probably now sold about 10 million of them. It's really one of the most popular stories in precious metals today, and kind of taking that space by storm. It's a very old story. Obviously, we have this jump from ancient Rome to today is interesting, but here we are.
Which we've actually sold. I'm actually passing around a 1 and a 50 gold back, which is, I think that's your largest, retail product, and they're a customer of yours, gold back, and they've created basically this competing currency to the dollar. When it first came out, I thought it was really gimmicky. And one had come into our store, and I said, "What is this? You guys bought this?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, it's gold." And I said, "Okay." And I saw it in the display, and then I noticed a couple of days later it was gone. And I said, "Somebody buy those?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we sold them right away." And I would guess, if you're saying you sold 10 million of these, I'm guessing that First National Bullion has sold I mean, it's hard to believe that you've only sold 10 million, because we've certainly sold hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of this product. And that's just the gold-backed product, not the Valorum, the other products.
Yeah, well, and that's individual bills. So, our kind of market cap is in line with a mid-tier stablecoin. We're in the hundreds of millions out there for gold bills. And we now have a gold-backed 100, which is a 10th ounce gold. Starting to overlap with what the U.S. Mint can do. So that's a $400 melt piece.
And then he's working with companies like First National Bullion to create our own, 10th ounce gold Valorum product. But, with our branding on it, it's a way for us to get a smaller gold product out there to people. Whereas if you buy a minted U.S. gold coin, there's a big premium from the U.S. Mint. And if you buy 1 gram products from a manufacturer, the technology, I think he's got it now to where we can compete and put out product that is smaller, more usable for commerce than used to be possible, basically.
That's right. And, what we have is a decoupling of coinage with the gold market, and that's being driven by large banks and central banks where, a $4,000 ounce piece is just not usable for commerce. That doesn't make any sense as a kind of standard unit. And so, the marketplace really needs $10, $100, $200 increments to do that with conventional coinage. So what you have to get into is, real nanotechnology where you're doing something truly unique and kind of breaking what we think of as a coin to actually preserve the idea of a coin, which worked pretty good for 2,000 years.
Adam, I'm curious on that too, because you also started as an academic, correct? Teaching the history of...
I started in venture capital, and then that was kind of a family business, and I said, I got to get away from this, and I was like, I'm going to be an academic, and then I got pulled back into entrepreneurship. So, what your center is doing is really cool to me, kind of straddling those two worlds.
Yeah, so I'm curious too, because you saw earlier in our conversation, I hope, that we started along the conversation of security. And I'm curious onto the decision that you made to grab this nanotechnology and look at gold and metal, precious metals as the opportunity to go into. But beyond that, looking at the bullion market as something disruptable, for anybody who's ever followed it, right? Gold's supposed to do this dead thing, and your company is breathing new life into this material. So really curious onto, was it the opportunity for security? Was it the opportunity to compete with digital coinage? What was it that really sparked that for you?
I was doing this before, Bitcoin was really a thing. Although the technology's come kind of infinity far in that time. I think initially it was about recognizing that there was this breaking away of what would be a sensible coin in gold. But then what I quickly realized was that there's actually a security problem, and First National has phenomenal tools to assess if the gold is, a gold coin is real. But most people don't have those, and that's why we don't see gold actually circulating anymore. You'd be hard pressed to buy a car or a lunch with gold in a standard form because nobody trusts it, and they probably shouldn't if you're just kind of trying to fob a coin off on somebody else. And what's interesting about our technology, and we have a number of patents around this, so there's we could go into detail as we wanted to, is by structuring the actual gold substrate, it becomes very, very difficult to counterfeit. And then we can embed other security features into it. So what we're doing is we're taking all of these miracles of sort of material science that you see in a conventional banknote, And then we're actually bringing that together in how the molecules are laid down with the gold itself. And bringing those two things together, you take a Lydian technology, a Roman technology, and you update it to something worthy of the 21st century. Whereas we're getting to the point, I would say 5 years ago we were at the point where it was very, very difficult for any conventional mint in the world to even forge this if they wanted to. We're getting to the point where you really, there's maybe only one or two governments in the world that could make a passable sample. And we expect to be able to exceed that by sometime next year. And so, what we want to do is restore trust to the precious metals market. It's an enormous market. It's an enormous market. It's worth more than all of the cryptocurrency put together. And yet it's a very quiet market because most people don't like to say what they're doing. And the big players are huge financial institutions like central banks that are not particularly interested in drawing the attention of the general public. But we think we're playing in a space that's bottomless.
You're also minting or manufacturing for central governments at this point, right? There are a number of different republics.
Yeah, I was going to wave around our Republic of Cameroon bill that I have sitting here on my desk, but we've manufactured for I think 8 governments and a very, very exciting one to come in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, we partner. Just as in Rome, they're turning that technology to the state. We think states can have governments can have an important role in assuring coinage, and we think that we're the best solution for modern coinage. So we're slowly winning that argument.
There's also some rumor maybe that the great state of Texas might be doing something. Is that true? Or you want to talk about that?
Yeah, no comment, but that's what I alluded to. There could be something very interesting happening with the world's 9th largest economy.
Yeah, that is interesting because there are more states now, right, that are looking at like Florida and Utah that have bills that gold and silver are transferable, but also the business itself isn't just a metals business that you're in. You're a mint, and you are a private mint providing this very unique service to national mints. What is that business like? How much opportunity is there for innovation in the mint space?
It's horrible. Selling to governments is really tough. It's a very long sales cycle, and in general, governors of central banks, they never want to be the first. I kind of came out all brash and young, and I said, "Hey, we're going to set your, we're going to really do something that increases your reserves, and this is going to be brand new and high tech," and they hated it. And so, now what we've learned to do is to point out that fundamentally what we want them to do is have a precious metals program very similar to what the U.S. Mint or the Royal Canadian Mint or the Royal Mint in the U.K. does. And this technology is very, very well established and far more difficult to counterfeit. So, we really stress the conservative nature of what we're doing. And, it's one of those funny places where governments can actually earn money not by tax, and we're very proud of that. And I learned that from my good friend Ed Roy, former director of the U.S. Mint, who returned about $3 billion to the general fund because of how well he managed the U.S. Mint. And, that's what we want to show governments how to do is, how to be net positive but also help their citizens. And I think we're on the road for that. And I think we have much, much bigger ones ahead. But it's actually not uncommon that private companies are providers to governments in this way. Most, if you look at a $100 bill, you might see a single bill. I see 15 different suppliers who are supplying different security features to that bill. It's very rare that a government can innovate, this super high-tech stuff. And so what you wind up doing is, kind of creating this composite product of, several fields of absolutely genius material science. And, that's what the Aurum is, that's what Valorum is providing. And we're compatible with a number of other security features with some modifications too. So, we're a private provider because, I'm going to tell you right now, there's only a handful of governments in the world that we have the resources or wherewithal to remotely reproduce what we do, let alone our international patents. It's really, really tough for them. But we can help them out and plenty.
It's that making money can make money, I think is so that's the same supply chain as a car, right? But is the opportunity really in security? And also, we had talked a little bit about like gold-backed digital dollar. That brings us to this moment where gold is becoming more than the product itself. Everything digital is becoming integrated with the physical things. And as the mixed reality guy here, these digital products that we're all thinking, is that something that's on the horizon for you? Do you see that happening around you or for you?
Absolutely. So, it's probably 8 years that people have been seriously trying to put gold on blockchain. There's better and worse projects to do it. It's pretty hard to be proprietary about it, but quite recently, this isn't trying to endorse one, Tether's absolutely running away with the show there. The problem is, this is really a new digital conveyance of a very old idea, which is that you have supplies of gold, vaulted supplies of gold, and essentially claim checks on that gold. But you hope you can get your jacket at the end of it. That system doesn't work though without the ability to physically withdraw your gold. And what's happening is that the physical market is breaking down, not just in terms of the price of coins, but in a half a dozen different ways. The silver market literally broke about a month ago. We could talk about that. There's very weird things happening because there's trillions of dollars that are digital or bank balances looking for physical assets to buy up. And there has to be an underlying solution for those physical assets, and that's where we come in. So, we have various projects to integrate with, digital gold, and I think that those will work. But unless you can withdraw your gold, you have essentially another trust-based fiat system, and that's what's starting to kind of come under a lot of pressure in this moment, I think.
Yeah, I think historically you see those cycles quite a bit. I think one of the things that's remarkable is when you are working in a gold-based economy where the money is defined by gold, you have a physical limitation on the money supply, and this does all sorts of weird things with economic growth. So there's a moment in the 8th century where you have a Roman emperor who maintains huge budget surplus, and the financial system at that moment has broken. So, previous Roman emperors could maintain a surplus and it didn't affect the monetary supply, but in his case, the financial system is not there to provide, basic money beyond the gold supply, and it creates massive deflation. And you see the same thing in the US in the 1870s, 1880s, where the economy is growing faster than the gold supply. And so you run into this issue because the money is physically defined by the amount of gold that's there. Money becomes more valuable than goods, and so the price of goods collapses. And I think this is a real challenge that you run into in these systems. You have to have a balance between the financial system providing assets that are not physically drawn upon, but can be physically drawn upon. And so, like in a Roman case, most of these financial instruments remain financial instruments, but they could be drawn upon and drawn down upon if you needed to. you're just maintaining the trust that you don't actually need to do it. And the state basically plays a game where they try to ensure there's going to be enough precious metal if there is a drawdown that they can meet it and restore trust. But it is, in a sense, a game. There are more assets out there than there is money. And so I think you're right that if you have non-tangible assets linked to gold and the gold isn't there, people are going to have real problems with that. And they do physically want to be able to have the gold in that kind of context.
I think that's right, and I think, I don't believe that we are going to suddenly and magically not have various fiat currencies in the world. But what there's always been is a competition of different standards for people's savings and commerce. And you see that. My favorite example is if most of us grew up reading Shakespeare plays in high school. I used to teach them, and it talks about ducats and things, and that's because Spanish and Italian money was very familiar to people in Britain in Shakespeare's day. There's always been a competition for currency, and in most times people are fairly fluent, and in most places people are fairly fluent in those different currencies. What's interesting about our historical moment, I think starting in the 2010s and then really accelerating now, is you're seeing a dissolution of the certainty of which there's people want to use, and gold is growing in importance. And there's a kind of clamoring to rush into gold, not as the only standard, but as a fundamentally important one. And I think there will be trillions more dollars that are going after a quite limited supply that grows very, very slowly. So, medium term, it's a phenomenal asset, and that's why many central bankers around the world are betting against investing in gold.
Let's make sure. Okay, so the last 20 minutes here. Thank you very much. That was amazing, and I apologize for the Zoom for everybody. If you are able to hang on for another 20 minutes as we do call it Q&A. You okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll say something though about his product. They had asked me about what I do, and I spoke with you briefly and discussed with you the history of money, and I'm happy to come discuss it. But I said I don't have a particularly innovative product or an innovative business. Just gold that's been around for thousands of years, but I'm always happy to come talk about it. And it was Peter Drucker that really, I'm a business guy. I happen to like this product, and I like building business and so on. But Peter Drucker said all business is marketing and innovation. So more than anything, I've got a product that's not particularly innovative. So it's just marketing. Whether I'm here, maybe somebody wants to buy gold, hopefully they'll come buy it from First National Bullion. What he's done is create an innovative product, but even still, he needs to market it, and get it in front of people. Gold, people want to buy it. He's actually innovated and come up with something which is really very, very cool. And so we're actually going to hopefully do some First National Bullion products with them, and I've seen it's been neat for me to see his product take off from when I first saw it come in, and I thought it was gimmicky because I just didn't understand it. And I was, well, the price above gold, it's, who's going to buy this? Well, apparently a lot of people will buy it, and it's really neat to see what he's done. So yeah, in any case.
Yeah, great.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. And it's been hard and fun to win over an industry that's deeply conservative, but also full of people who see some real concerns in the system, and that's very rewarding for me. So thank you.
Yep.
All right, we're gonna pass this one between us. You stay on there.
I think we're at the Q&A.
We are at the Q&A portion
Right, so,
of the evening.
Sir?
Thank you so much, very interesting. Is it unreasonable to think of the Swiss franc as a hedge against the loss of value of the dollar? When I went to Switzerland for the first time in 1963, the dollar bought 4 Swiss francs. Today the exchange rate is $1.25 for 1 Swiss franc. So it's gone from 25 cents per Swiss franc to $1.25 per Swiss franc, or a 500% loss of value of the dollar relative to the Swiss franc. So what kind of a role does the Swiss franc play as a hedge against dollar devaluation?
Well, you just answered it. I mean, what your question is the answer. Absolutely, yeah. So now the Swiss it's always had gold, been somewhat gold backed, and I don't know the exact amount, but they have lessened the amount of gold over the last number of years that backs their currency. But yeah, for just like you did, or maybe if you did as an investment or a hedge, but people have always done that. They've bought it, in modern, in my lifetime, people have bought the Swiss franc as a hedge against the U.S. dollar because the Swiss, and I don't know the percentage that their central bank has in gold, but for that reason, it's because of gold. It's because the Swiss franc or their central bank is gold backed to a certain degree.
Well, and let's not just beat up the dollar to point to a more structural point. There are over $1 trillion of paper $100 bills outside of this country, which means that they have no legal status because people in other countries have a worse currency than the dollar. So people all over the world are constantly looking for the best standard to hold their life savings, to hold their hopes and their dreams, and preserve the fruits of their labor. And there's nothing harder than giving up part of your life for work. There's nothing more important than ensuring that you get to actually spend it. And it's just a very human, very modern problem to be hunting for something to do. Gold has a critical role to play right now. But the Swiss franc has done very well, and the U.S. dollar's done a lot better than some of the other countries we talked to. But gold's doing very, very well right now. And I think that's for some fundamental reasons, and I think it's going to do better going forward.
I'll just you talk about people in Europe and the rest of the world holding dollars. Something that I saw for the first time, I've been to Gibraltar twice, and the last time I went there were signs they would not take US dollars, and I thought that was really interesting. I've never, everyone had always wanted US dollars, and the last time I went there, they would not take US dollars anywhere. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think traveling, there's a couple things I would say about that. I mean, I think that point about the $1 trillion US dollars in circulation, it means that you effectively have an economy run in US dollars in a lot of places, simply because it's available, right? So you have a really significant task in breaking that. If you want to substitute some other currency for that, you have to somehow get currency in quantity into those countries. So like in Kinshasa, you can run ATMs and they'll give you dollars, because the supply is so immense, because it has been that sort of fundamental value reserve currency for people in that country. If you wanted to replace it with euro, or you wanted to replace it with yen, or whatever you choose, you somehow have to get the supply there. And then you have to make it so that there's a critical mass that can actually circulate in the way a dollar does. So I think you're right, that actually is. There's just a sort of force of gravity that comes along with having that presence. And that's why you see in the ancient world, you see so many countries that maintain the circulation of coins from other countries, because there's a critical mass of those coins already in circulation there. And you can either create something different and flood the market, but then you need a supply, or you work with what you've got. And so I think that is one important thing. But I think the other thing that's interesting with Swiss francs is you look at bond yields, and during some of the moments in the height of the pandemic, Swiss francs had negative bond yields. You paid a premium to hold a Swiss franc bond because this was people who had the ability to flee currencies easily were fleeing to that currency. But if you're a vendor in Kinshasa, the Swiss francs are not there, right? The dollars are there. And so if the Swiss franc is going to replace the dollar in Kinshasa, you're going to have to dump a huge amount of Swiss francs there. Swiss franc will then lose its value, right? So I think that there's an issue, a structural issue, because of that amount of cash that's circulating.
There is, and I think that's really interesting. And I wouldn't say that we want to replace the dollar or any other currency. We want to provide alternatives for people, and particularly in terms of their savings. The other side of what you're describing, and it's a mountain of cash. It's a mountain of value underlying that cash and people's hopes and dreams attached to it. So, we should take seriously, these kinds of, fears over bank runs or, crises in currency. But it can happen very, very, very quickly. And, people move very quickly when there's a loss in confidence. And this is not theoretical. You don't need to go back to, the kind of Weimar Republic Germany or something. It's happening every year in a couple of countries. They have 60, 70, 100, 200% inflation. And it's a constant in modern fiat supposedly managed currencies. And so the need for something that is outside of that is fundamental and a multi-trillion-dollar problem. And it was, for a while, gold was well trusted, or the dollar was well trusted, and the tides are kind of shifting. But for quite a while, dollars are going to be pretty comfy for people compared to, better than the alternative in consensus for people. And I don't think that we should just sort of dismiss that or something. It is very real, and we're all sort of looking around for, people all over the world are looking around for a life raft in the wreckage. It's like the end of Titanic or something. And we hope to provide a really good life raft for people. So that's that's kind of the vision.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next question.
I have a comment and a question. I love history, and so I wanted to just add in here that it wasn't the Romans that were the first to make gold coins. It started in what is now Turkey, Lydia, with King Croesus, and then the Persians. That goes back considerably before the Romans and the Greeks. But my question is, I'm really curious why you think the U.S. could possibly turn back to a gold standard. The amount of metric tons of gold is like around 8,000 metric tons. That's roughly equivalent to $600 billion in current prices. And compare that to 20 trillion plus in broad money supply in the U.S. So how could you possibly go back to that? There's, the price of gold would be outrageously expensive in the tens of thousands of dollars per ounce, or you'd have to have a massive deflation, which no government wants. I just can't see how the U.S. could possibly go back to the gold standard, and so I'd like for you to talk about that.
Let me start with a comment. We actually did a Lydian bill commemorating Croesus, and we're about to do a second one. It's not just Greek, and I fully agree with you. And it's a world history. And the biggest consumers of gold are in Asia now, in China and India. As far as the U.S., I do not see a return to the gold standard anytime soon. I think the fiat will be strong enough to limp along for quite some time. But there is already a revaluation of gold that's occurring. I don't think it's going to be the basis of the U.S. dollar. I think it's going to be an independent currency. It is an independent currency. And that revaluation starts at $270 in 2000, and now we're up over 4,100. And it's increasing in momentum. And we will have, I think we will have $10,000 gold. Maybe that sounds a little kooky, but it sounds like it did 5 years ago.
Yeah, not at all kooky. Especially when you what's kooky to me is that Bitcoin, a string of numbers and that you can't touch, you can't make anything out of it. It was first to market, but there's how many other cryptos now? Thousands of them. If Bitcoin's at 100,000 or 90,000, then gold could be at $1 million. I wouldn't have thought it, but absolutely, I think that the price of gold, for me to kind of answer, I think the price of gold has to go much higher, and I think it's starting to happen, as Adam had said. But the U.S. government still has gold, or the Federal Reserve, I guess, has gold balance on its balance sheet, I think at $45 an ounce still. We haven't revalued it, and I think part of the thing is that they want to let the free market run the price of gold up and then we rebalance it on our books, the US government does, if the gold's really still here.
That might happen, and I don't know, John. What I will say that I think is really interesting in terms of the questioner's comments, and I wish we could just sit in a coffee shop for 2 hours talking, because this is my cup of tea, and I'm sure I can learn from you. But the above ground gold supply in the world is very close to the broad money supply at about $20 trillion today. So there is a revaluation coming, and it is. I don't know that they'll necessarily be exactly tied to each other, but financial markets are beginning to price that into gold.
And the BRICS, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, the BRICS countries are also talking about a new currency and commodity-backed, not just it'll be a basket of currencies and commodities, but a big cornerstone of that, as I understand, is gold.
So interesting times. Probably not great for the U.S., but interesting times. I hope we can talk more. Thank you for your question.
I think that, yeah, question.
Yes, there's a question. I'm sorry, it came first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I had a question, kind of returning to the idea of like using currencies as an alternative to like established systems, right? I'm imagining people who maybe they prefer to have their savings in something that's not tied to a government that they don't see, I don't know why you would, right? Or maybe it's someone who engages in like terrorist actions, or they're a sanctioned country, or they're a cartel of some sort, right? So they want to put their money in something that is not, I guess, seizable, or maybe something that's encrypted or not trackable, right? So I'm imagining like a future. We mentioned maybe Bitcoin gets banned in the US, and then there becomes like a stable US dollar that can be transferred based on like who has Bitcoin. And then for me, I'm imagining all these groups who are interested in illicit economies, right? They would no longer have a way of sort of, I guess, acting. So I would imagine that another alternative currency would pop up. So I guess my question is really, is it feasible to imagine a future where there are no longer currencies, or there are no longer like these value systems that are capable, or that I guess you could say criminals are capable of using to engage in the businesses that they engage in, or like non-state, anti-state actors, or whatever you want to call it?
I will start with the early part, and I'll hand the stuff off to the later people. But basically, I think what you see, and I think Rome shows a really good example of this. Rome didn't have currency for a very long time. It's really surprising that it takes them 350 years really to get currency. But what they still did have was a system of assigning value to things, and you need to have that, right? And so so at various moments in Roman history, you have notional currency that is used for accounting purposes that relate to coins that don't circulate anymore. So like in the 4th century AD, your currency that you use for accounting purposes are drachma, even though they don't circulate anymore. Because what you have is currency that is circulating in a fashion that is unstable, and you can't readily move between the different elements of the currency. You still have to have something that assigns a consistent value to whatever you have. So before Romans had currency, it was whatever the equivalent value of whatever it is you're counting is in ounces of bronze. And so you don't have currency, but you have a value system. And if you don't have a value system, it's almost impossible to do exchange. So I think that, so the starting point has to be, for any way that you understand the accumulation of resources, you have to have a standard way to value it. And it can be $1, it can be a drachma, it can be an ounce of bronze. But you need to be able to understand that like this many eggs and this many chairs and this many ounces of gold, they equate in this particular way. And that mechanism needs to exist somehow.
You were talking, I think, about illicit activity, and is there a way without a currency? Am I correct on your question? Like, what would you? Well, I want to use an example of jail. I have not been, law-abiding citizen. I pay my taxes. But as I understand it, you could use cigarettes as currency in jail. So people will find some medium of exchange that they can agree on value. It's just been that for thousands of years, gold's been the easiest to do. You could use cigarettes, but if cigarettes get so valuable, people will just grow more tobacco and the value of cigarettes will go down. Whereas gold, I think we increase the supply of gold like 2% a year. And then, the lady's first question, she mentioned how many metric tons of gold. All the gold ever mined throughout all of history would fit inside. When I drove by, there's like an Olympic pool out there. That's all the gold in the world ever mined, and what's basically still in the ground is, I just saw an infographic the other day. I mean, it's not a lot of gold to go around. So that, for that reason, it made more sense than tobacco or wheat or eggs or something. But the criminals will always find some black market outside of a U.S. currency, and I guess gold's a good one too. But hold on a second. Yeah, and then you have something you want to add to that, and then there's another lady with a question.
I think we just need to separate. I think money is a basic human function, and then there's payment rails that can be used to evade laws. I think we've got too much confusion of the one for the other. Because of how Bitcoin got started in this, absolutely ludicrous idea that it was going to be perfectly anonymous when it was permanently traceable and available, the ledger and resource was totally available. That became a way for try to crack down on something that was really already out of the box. And I don't think Bitcoin's going anywhere. It has too much utility. Gold is certainly never going anywhere. It has too much utility, and there will always be people trying to find ways to move value outside of government or other kinds of constraint. Some of that illegal, but that doesn't. I don't think that's a reason to condemn monetary innovation in any way.
Christy. I was just curious, can you explain to me how the gold buck? This was the gold dollar?
Yeah, that we passed around.
Yeah, can you explain to me how that could be used in commerce? Like, what's the process of serializing it and making it normalized to accept as a form of payment versus a coin, like let's say a small company started to manufacture coins, or versus like collector coins. I've seen like Disney has a coin and it has their characters on it, and then it's at a premium price beyond the price of gold, because it's a collector. Like, how can you make these monetary vehicles become serialized and transactable in commerce?
So they've done that with the gold back. The problem that I have with it is that it's still a kind of a higher premium over the price of gold, but they have done a good job of creating it to where you can use it in commerce. And in fact, on the Goldback website, which the Adams company manufactures it for Goldback, he does, it's a separate company, and they produce other currencies. But on the Goldback website, there's vendors that will accept Goldback, and Utah's really big, that's where it started. So Ace Hardware in Utah, you can go in and you can purchase products at the Ace Hardwares based on the value of the Goldback at their time, which you can see the exchange value on their website. It fluctuates with the price of gold up and down. So those vendors will take X amount of dollars of Goldbacks based on, if one Goldback, the exchange rate right now is $7 or something. I don't know what it is, I'm just saying. They'll say, okay, this screwdriver's $7, that'll be one Goldback, and they'll take it. So they're trying to do that. But to get vendors, the reality is anybody can do it. I give Goldbacks as tips. I'm in the gold business, it's interesting for me, it's a conversation starter. So I'll put a Goldback as a tip, and bartender or the Uber driver will be, what's this? It's gold. Well, no, it's not. Well, no, it is. Yeah, it's absolutely gold. You bring it to one of our 5 convenient locations, we'll pay you $7 for it. What? No way. I'm going to keep it. That's so neat. And then they're showing their friends. So for me, that's how I use it. But they are using it, and anybody could use it. I gave an example earlier that one of my sales guys bought a vehicle for $17,000 or $18,000 in Goldbacks. So, I mean, it is being used as a currency. As far as the coins that Disney's putting out and otherwise, you could do the same thing, but those are being marketed, like you said, more as a collectible than as a currency. So, I mean, but if someone's willing to trade you their Subaru for a Disney gold coin, absolutely, you can do that.
Maybe this is too simplistic and not the question, but I just want to make sure we hit it. The difference between the 1 and the 50 gold back is obviously it's a little bit bigger in area, but in thickness it's radically bigger. So if you melted both of those down, there literally would be 50 times the amount of gold in the one bill, or left from the one bill than the other. So it is precisely the amount of gold that's in there, and the gold back system is based on 1/1000th of an ounce. So a 50 gold back has 50 1/1000ths of an ounce in it. And then there's a multiplying function, so you can figure out exactly how much that gold is worth. And vendors can use it and scan the bills, and ATMs dispense it, and it's a sort of micro cash system, with some obviously differences, but based on the raw value of the gold that's in the bill.
But you're a company, is your product being backed or serialized by the Federal Reserve? I mean, you're usurping the traditional way we think of money being issued. And you're a company doing it, not the Federal Reserve, through the government.
Yeah. So, good question. Usurp, I would challenge. But how do we think about this? There are numerous companies that issue gold or silver that has a market value, and it's legal for anyone to essentially barter, and that's a right that people have. Federal money, or the Fed, backs it by a promise to pay. This has no promise to pay. The promise is in the gold that's actually delivered. So it doesn't have the same backing because it's not, a Federal Reserve note is a note. It's a debt instrument. This isn't a debt instrument. It's a final payment. And gold has functioned that way for thousands of years. In fact, the U.S. Mint provides gold similarly. In that case, it's also not a promise to pay. It's a delivered amount of gold. So you can have a public or a private delivered amount of gold. The assurance is in the gold itself. So it's a different fundamental basis for how to think about money.
So if I want to do my own coin, I don't need anybody to bless it. I could just make it, say it's an ounce, prove that it's an ounce.
Yeah, but I will say this, I talked about the book The Creature from Jekyll Island that set me on this whole path. So there was an example of a gentleman that started something called the Liberty Dollar, and I was actually one of the early buyers of that. Well, the government shut that down and arrested that guy. He went to jail because he put a dollar value. He made $5 Liberty Dollars, $1 Liberty Dollars. So while I think it's because he used the dollar symbol on them, and they actually put that guy in jail and confiscated all the gold. I never got my order. But in any case, so I guess there's some nuance to the legality of how you do it.
We have a question.
The trick is, one important piece is there's no confusing everybody, and it's arguable that Von Nothaus wanted to confuse people. He also had a constitutional point and kind of extra grinds, in my opinion. We're trying to deliver real value in the form of gold. He was trying to, that to me is arguably a usurping, where he's saying this is more a dollar than what the Federal Reserve puts out. We don't want any part of that. We see us as a voluntary alternative. Just as in early history of our country, a lot of commerce was conducted with Spanish money. People don't know that either. Spanish gold and silver was more in circulation than U.S. So, that's what they were trading. That's where dollar comes from. So it's not, it's not really so weird or something. The Federal Reserve is an institution, and
It's a private institution. It's not federal. It's not reserve.
yeah, but in any event, people have the right to choose to buy gold, and we're trying to provide the best form of it. That's fundamentally what it comes down to.
What was the question here?
One more comment, and then I'll get to this
Okay,
one round up. So also, you will find that back of this room, MAVERiC Studio has minted its own coins. The reason why this happened tonight is because about a year ago, we started to figure out how we wanted to monetize and how we wanted to play in our night market arcades. I'm a video game guy. I miss the old arcade token days and go on to the nickel sides, right? Out here in the West Coast, it's a little less common because U.S. cash currency was everywhere. Quarters, nickels are all over here, and silver dollars. But back east, and especially early on, you find a lot of private mints like Osborne Mint or others who actually found all of their business making laundry tokens, bus tokens, all of this other stuff. When we talked about money supply, U.S. is absolutely fine with you making money for your own economy. And in California, there are protected laws that you can make and mint a community currency out of whatever you'd like. It could be plastic or boots, if you'd like. But it is possible.
Well, I really enjoyed the back and forth between currency in the Roman era and modern currency. One question I had was, how long did coins typically circulate? So, in the reign of Diocletian, would people still be trading with coins minted at the time of Claudius, right? Because in modern terms, you might find cash which is 10 years old, right, in circulation. Older than that is pretty rare. So, what, in the other case, what made people continue to use old currency, but now people, you don't find old currency in circulation?
So I think what we know about Roman currency circulation patterns is it circulates for a very, very long time. So there's Pompeii, the eruption of Pompeii is in 81. There's Republican coins circulating in Pompeii, lots of them. So those coins are at least 110 years old. We know that under the first Julio-Claudian emperors, the bronze currency circulated so much that it was completely, the faces were completely indistinguishable, and they had to countermark it. I think the best example, though, is under Marcus Aurelius. This is between the 160s and 180. They reissue these legionary denarii. So what had happened is the denarius is originally minted as basically it's a drachma. It's minted as a 4-gram silver coin. And under the empire, this gets smaller and smaller. But Mark Antony, when he was fighting the civil war against Octavian, minted low-weight denarii. And these circulate for a very long time. And when these coins that were popular got so worn that you couldn't really identify them anymore, the imperial mint would sometimes issue what are called restitution issues, where they're basically re-minting old coins that are popular. And under Marcus Aurelius, there's a restitution issue of the Mark Antony coins. So those coins are 200 years old at that point. So, so very clearly these things circulate for a long time, but the higher value, the longer it's going to circulate. So a good Roman gold coin is going to circulate 100 years easily because it doesn't actually circulate very much. It just sits as savings. A silver coin will be in circulation longer. A bronze coin is probably going to fall out of circulation fastest. But generally I would think you would imagine with those examples, you can see that these things are around for easily 100 years. And we have hoards from, say, the 260s that are, there's actually a really cool Roman emperor who tries to correct for inflation and basically stabilize the currency in Gaul by increasing the size of the bronze coins and increasing the purity of the gold and silver. And we know that those coins are hoarded in the 260s alongside coins from the Antonine period. So coins that are anywhere from 100 to 150 years old. And and we know that those coins are still in circulation. So so I think the lifetime for these coins is tremendously long. But you do see at moments where the monetary system changes and coins come out of circulation well before they're worn out. So if you want to buy a really nice condition Roman coin, you can get tons of them from the reign of Aurelian, because Aurelian institutes a new monetary system in the 270s, and it's scrapped in the 290s. So those coins are actually very high quality coins. They don't circulate for very long, and then they get demonetized. And so you can buy a really beautiful, like, freshly minted Aurelian coin for like $30. Because they're minted in massive quantities. I mean, under Diocletian, the Roman mint is producing 30 million coins a year. So they're minting at that level for hundreds of years, but the coins that are in circulation and stay in circulation, they get worn out. The ones that get removed from circulation, they're in great shape because nobody spends them, they just get sort of put aside. And they don't have a high precious metal content, so nobody melts them.
Yeah, out of curiosity, so I spent the past 10 weeks doing research on debasement in the Ottoman Empire, and I've also done research debasement of a lot of other historical currencies. But why is it that silver currency tends to be the only currency that gets debased rather than gold currency?
I mean, in the Roman context, silver currency gets debased in part because it's the fundamental part of that system. So that's set up as basically a drachma system. That's a silver system. You guys would know this more than me, but I think what you see with the debasements in the Roman period is you can basically make that a tolerable thing if two things are happening. First, because most of the money is not held physically, you have kind of a de facto fiat currency, where this has basically a value that's not tied to its silver content. When you start running into problems is when you debase that so much that you no longer have an alloy, but you're doing a wash. So, so you see across the course of the 3rd century, up until the mid-250s, they're debasing really radically, right? The coin under Augustus is probably 99% pure. Under Domitian, it's 90. By the time you're, into the 3rd century, it's about 30. By the 250s, it drops to like 5. And it does that across the 250s. But you cross that threshold of, now you no longer can have an alloy that looks like a silver coin. Now you have something that's washed, and people start sweating the silver off. You start getting a dual monetary system, and that gets really messy. So, so I think in the Roman context, what you can see is silver debasement works really well because you can more or less create an alloy that maintains the color, sort of, in a way that's plausible until you get to a certain purity level, and then you can't anymore. And once you get to that point, then the currency becomes something that isn't, you can basically make it so the currency that comes out of the mint and the currency that you're buying stuff with are two different things, and you've profited 5% of the weight in silver, and then you run into real problems. I don't know, but you guys would know more about that.
I think you answered better than I did. Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
That are a little bit more modern. What you see, more recently in the last few hundred years is attempts to set up a bimetallic system where you try to have a peg between gold and silver, and these continually break. Somebody figures out basically the actual values get out of whack, and you have a cram in silver or gold, and debasement coin is. The debasement of coin is really banknotes. So, you have a bank and then they issue, they'll hold 20% reserve, 10% reserve, 5% reserve, 2% reserve. And then you have, people get scared about it and they all try to cram in and get, the 2% coverage and be the first ones to actually get the gold. And so you have banking crisis after banking crisis after banking crisis in the 1800s. And the debasement is really in the proportion of banknotes that are basically oversubscribed for the amount of gold coin in circulation. And that functionally approaches zero. And when it's an absolute zero, it's a fiat currency. But, when you don't have enough, when you have more claim checks than jackets, somebody's going to go cold sooner or later.
All right. So going back to gold back and considering the difference between gold back, which if we consider it as gold minted in cash form, and gold block itself. So what's the differentiation in usage between gold back and just gold raw gold?
Yeah, so let me speak to that. they're functionally are based on the same thing and the raw gold. The problem you have with raw gold is, what do I do with this? I mean, you can actually buy, little pebbles of gold, but nobody believes that they're gold. And they're actually really hard to sort of deal with. The conventional coin makers are trying to make tiny, tiny, tiny coins. You can barely even see them or hold them or handle them, let alone verify them. So, raw gold, and let's be really clear what raw gold is. Raw gold is still a unit of gold. It's a good delivery bar. There's two different standards. One is COMEX in the US, and then
The other one's a cliffhanger.
So, did you say we have time only for one more question? Because there's two more.
Oh, we can take two. Okay.
All right.
Let's get out of that.
All right, let's,
So real quick, so the purpose of
No signal, so I saw.
Okay, your signal dropped.
Okay.
Come back.
so the purpose of money is to tally the debt and credit that's created in the selling of goods and services. So metallic coinage and promissory notes, paper bill, was the technology that was available to be able to make that counting, which is the term that was used. And it's not perfect technology. So the limits to gold in my mind are, like I said, it's limited. All the amount of gold that is present in the world and will be extracted does not add up to all the money that's in circulation. And the second problem with gold, in my opinion, from the history, is that people tend to hoard it. And it concentrates into the hands of a few, the elite, and it takes away from the microtransactions that are very important in the economy, the buying of small stuff, the food of stuff. So that is the drawback of gold. I think that is why we're moving to more electronic banking, like computer-attributed technology to maintain that tally of all the transactions that went on. So I think that is the future of money, which we're at already, I think.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to have the microphone, I missed that.
I can try. Not my thing, but I guess what I would say is the microtransactions is a real problem, and it's a real problem in. I mean, the Roman model is a great one for this. The era of the solidas. You can't do microtransactions with them, and they have real trouble building out a system that uses bronze effectively because of the microtransactions. And so that creates all sorts of issues, and for the better part of 150 years they struggle. And so they basically do come back to a system where they create new denominations of bronze that are able to be built up to gold, with the understanding that as was said, that peg is not going to be perfect, and the government is sometimes going to take a loss on that. And you have to basically decide if you're going to support the gold coinage and take a loss, and you have the resources to do it, or not. And the Roman government decides, yes, we're going to take that loss. And so the gold coinage, stays, even though the bronze coinage can fluctuate. You still are going to maintain that peg because they think it's important, because you need a bridge from the small transactions to the big transactions. And in their system, though, the reason that bridge works is because most of the money is not coined. And so the government can take those losses in large part because most of its resources are not in gold, silver, or bronze. And so they can basically be willing to support the gold coinage even when that peg breaks.
Okay. No, I mean, if you want to try and call them on your phones.
Oh, meanwhile, we have one last question.
Yeah.
Last question of the evening.
So I have two questions. The first one is, gold is usually always increasing. When would be a better time to buy it other than now? And the second question is, with AI, what do you see as the impact that it'll have on Bitcoin, the US dollar, and gold?
That is so you guys' question.
The impact of AI.
The impact of AI, but what was the first part of your question? I was answering as well, I'm sorry.
When's a better time to buy gold?
When's a better time to buy gold?
Than now.
Yesterday, tomorrow, today. So I don't think that the issues that have driven gold prices to record highs right now, we haven't solved government spending. Doge was a nice attempt, but nothing. We've got, what, $37 trillion debt. We're going to continue to print. So I think that gold is going to keep going higher. All the uncertainty in the world it's still a very uncertain time. I think gold will go higher. The impact of AI on gold, on currencies, I think it's scary. I think quantum computing and AI, from a security standpoint, it makes a very good case for gold. And as far as crypto, as you get quantum computing, I think it can faster process, these tokens and maybe devalue those. I'm not sure how that'll all work, but I do know that that's kind of the beauty of something that is so tangible and is so, I guess, I don't know the right word, but I guess tangible and that's not electronic. Having something like gold is kind of an insurance against any sort of a risk for cybersecurity or quantum computing or AI that can kind of hack these systems, hack your bank accounts, all these things. If you have something tangible that you can hold that's outside of the banking system, I think it's all, again, another argument for higher gold prices and why people should have a percentage of their portfolio or their even currency holdings in gold. You got anything on that?
Yeah, I would tend to agree, John, and what we've seen is an incredible expansion in physical assets and the value thereof, precisely as digitization has grown. And there were these great books written in the late 2010s about the death of cash. Well, guess what? Cash is still going up 6% a year in the U.S. and more in other places. Gold is going up. Collectibles are going up. The art market has largely been going up. And the reason for it is that a lot of wealth wants to be parked in physical spaces as a hedge against, and as a distinction from all these digital forms of value. And it's not either or, it's both. So, the more we go to a cashless economy, the more cash is actually held in this weird paradox. But it's all in $100 bills. It's not being spent anymore. Everybody is hungry for something physical. And that's studyable. These are by Fed statistics. It's like, they publish how many bills are outstanding and it's going up. So AI, I think, will accelerate that process. It doesn't mean that all value is going to become gold. We're not going to, suddenly only be trading Aurum. But the need for it is going up, and the market is very, very clearly signaling that, and it's a long trend.
That's great. Yeah. All right, so that's yours. So we're also here. So thank you to our guest, Adam. Thank you very, very much. John, thank you for bringing it. If you haven't checked it out in the back, check out what John's brought with Joe in the back. Ed, it's got a new book, just came out this month. It's available for you from the bookstore, from our very fine friends over there. MAVERiC Studio also funds their equipment for our students by these tokens. When you buy them and show up at our events and put them into our students or our alumni's coffers, that comes back to them in the form of increased equipment and more opportunities like this to work with you, our community here at UCSD Innovation. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. Hopefully you found a little golden tip for yourself that you can take home and check it out. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. All right. That was for the video. Yeah.